Hey, what's going on? Justin here from ModernMixing, and this is the first video of 2014. So I hope everyone had a happy and healthy and safe holiday with all their family and friends. And yeah, so that's it. So let's get right into this video. So I'm going to show you how I mix these Drake style drums, I guess you could say. And actually, truth be told, it's not just inspired by Drake. It's actually inspired by the Weeknd as well. So I'm kind of getting two different sort of angles here. Where with the Drake, it's more of the low fidelity sort of sound, and then with the Weeknd, it's kind of the ambient sound that he has on his record. So I'm kind of trying to, mold both of those together, but also at the same time put my own sort of spin and twist on it. So what I'll do first is I'm going to show you, because I'm only going to be talking about the verse drums in this particular record, because the drums change up a lot in different sections. But I'll play what it sounds like with the vocals, and that way you can hear the texture of the drums and also the ambience. And then I'll do a little bit before and after without any vocals, so you can hear a little bit closer to what's going on with the drums. And then we will get right into it. So let's listen to it now.
Learn to love how to dream. You learn to love how to dream. You're a good girl and you know it. You act so different around me. 'Cause you're a good girl and you know it. I know exactly who you could be. Exactly who you could be. Yeah, yeah.
By the way, if you want to hear the fully mixed version of this record from start to finish, just click the link below, or I'll add an annotation to this video and it'll take you right there. And you'll be able to hear sort of what I did as far as the entire record's concerned. But let's listen to the raw stuff now. This is exactly how the files were without any processing. So there's still a lot of empty space. Some of the sounds aren't quite deep enough, and they don't have that dirty lo-fi sort of Drake sound. And again, I wasn't trying to copy the Drake sound, but I was trying to get in that ballpark. So this is what it sounds like now with the processing on. Okay, so let's see how we were able to go from the raw sound to the processed sound. And first we'll talk about the effects. That way, once I'm talking about the processing and I'm explaining how I sent something to, this bus or that bus or whatever, I don't have to go back and explain it multiple times. So I'll explain the effects once, and then we'll go on to the explanation of the processing. And then hopefully you can understand where I'm coming from. But yeah, this is definitely not for beginners, because there is, I wouldn't say the routing is complex, but there's just multiple effects going on. And with one of the snares, I'm actually sending it to two different buses through the same path. So if you don't really understand routing that well, I would suggest that you go and learn that stuff a little bit first. And then you can watch this and hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. I'd say this is probably more of an intermediate, borderline advanced style tutorial. And again, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot to talk about. So the first effect, there's drum verb 1, then there's drum verb 2, then there's an 8th note and a vocal verb. So for drum verb 1, this is just straight up reverb. I think the snare was coming to this one. Just wanted to elongate that snare. So this one's a really long reverb time. I just loaded this thing up. I like the way this sounds. I kind of like the ambience that it has. It is an algorithmic reverb, which, is not They're not the most sought after reverbs, I'd say, in as far as mixing is concerned, but there is something about this reverb that sounds really good, and I don't know what it is, but it sounds really good on percussive stuff, like snares, sometimes hats, you know, whatever. I like the way it sounds. I wouldn't say it's natural, but it's a cool sounding environment. The other thing I did was I readjusted this pre-delay, and I left the mix to 100%, and this is time to the track. The next for drum verb 2, it's actually not really a reverb. This is more of like a rhythmic sort of element that I'm adding to the record. So there's a couple things coming, or sorry, just the one snare is coming to this reverb track, the drum verb or whatever, drum verb 2. But what it's doing is it's adding a little bit more rhythm to the snare, and in fact, it sounds more like it's adding another percussive sound to the track in the background. That's basically what it's doing. It's just, again, those spaces where it just felt like there needed to be a little bit more rhythm in there to just keep that vibe going of the record. So I have a 16th note on the left and an 8th on the right. The 16th is at 100% wet, then the right is at 84, and this is just to make it just a slightly bit more musical, so that way the left side's a little bit louder than the right side. And if you want to even go even more complex, you could sit here and automate these mix feeds or whatever, but I decided not to do that. Just left it. It sounded really good the way it was. And the feedback is at 43% and 46% on the right. Then it's into the Camel Crusher, just really trying to destroy these things, bring out the mid-range. You can see the distortion is set pretty high. A little bit of this parallel compression with the fat mode engaged as well. So trying to get rid of some of that low end and the top end and just focus them more on the mids. And you will hear that after. Then the air reverb. This is just trying to put these delays into a space. So even though like it's not technically a reverb, even though I did label it as drum verb, again, like I said, I was trying to go for that, you know, Weeknd style ambient sound to the record, and yeah, this just helped to put them a little bit more into that space with everything else in the record, just adding this reverb. So pre-delay, same thing, time at the record, 120 milliseconds. This time with the reverb time, I turned it down 1.7. And the mix is at 36% this time, just trying to really massage it into the record. Then after that, we have an 8th note, and I use the multi-delay for that. And just have the one here engaged, the tap set to an 8th. Feedback 26%, and the low cut and the high cut, I'm cutting them pretty drastically. That way it focuses up in the mid-range. Then I have the course here, kind of makes it stereo, a little bit swirly. It kind of floats from left to right a little bit, widens it out. Then after that, the EQ3, and along with the band pass that I kind of have set up here on the multi-delay, I also have another band pass here, and I'm really filtering it out. So it's really making it sharp in that, like, you know, 200 to, well, maybe even less, say 300 area, all the way up to about 2K. And it's just really making it tight and small sounding. That way it has a chance to cut through the record. Because there is a lot of dark sounds in this record between the piano and the synths and even the drums. There's a lot of low fidelity stuff going on, so there's not a lot of stuff that cuts through in the mid-range. And then I also have the Camel Crusher, and because it was so thin sounding, I use this Camel Crusher to really thicken it up and beefing it up. But I wouldn't have been able to achieve the same sound without the Camel Crusher. Like, even if I had been a little bit more conservative with the EQ, it just wouldn't come out the same. So I needed to make it really thin and small, then take the Camel Crusher, just destroy it, add some harmonics, thicken it up. But yet it's not doing a lot where it's adding like a ton of low end back to it or a ton of high end or whatever. It's just making it pierce through that even that much more, making it gritty sounding, and then just kind of cut through the mix. Then I have this Verb here, and this one is an IRL, the impulse response from Waves, and I have this from the Rhythm in Mind library, TC M5000 480 Hall. This one is pre-delay. This one is set up to the record as well. Release is 2.9 seconds, and if you just click below to the article, you'll there is a link to Rhythm in Mind, so you can get that. You know, if you want to look for this reverb preset for an impulse, you can download it there. It's actually a really nice sounding reverb. It sounds really natural. I like it. Then going into the Q10, cutting out some of that little low end junk there. Then also into the C1SC, there was just some mid-range frequency problems that I didn't like around 700, so I cut them out. It's sort of sounding boxy, I guess. And then from there, took the lo-fi plugin, just tried to make it a little bit more dirty, a little bit more gritty, just to fit it in the texture and the context of the rest of the record. I didn't want it to sound too clean because the rest of the record's kind of dirty sounding, so I wanted to follow suit and use this plugin to dirty it up. So that's it for the effects. So we will get onto each track now. The first is the first kick, and we will see what this sound. This is the first half of the verse, and the verse kind of goes here and ends here. So let's turn everything off. See what the kick sounds like before. So it is sort of lo-fi already because it's not exactly the most high fidelity sound, but it just needed to be a little bit deeper. I want to get rid of some of that click on the top end. So I added this lo-fi plugin. The sample rate, I'm reducing it all the way down to 8,820 hertz. That's a lot. So if you're not really familiar with this plugin, just know that that's a heck of a lot going on there. And then to sort of compensate for all that high-end loss, I'm boosting up the distortion here, and then also the saturation, adding a little bit of color to it. So let's see what this sounds like now. Before. After. So it's really dirty sounding. Next, I'm going to this 8th note delay. So let's see what that sounds like. Oh, I can turn these mutes off. Let's turn the 8th note on. So you can see how it rhythmically it times out really nicely with that kick. Just like as soon as that kick is dying out, boom, it comes right back in. And then from there we've got kick 2. I'll show you what this sounds like. It's more like a percussive sound, but it is a kick, so I label it kick. And I'm pan this one 53% to the left. So let's listen to it. Everything off. Alright, so the first thing is a Sony EQ Pro. You could hear it was really thin sounding, so I'm boosting up a ton at the bottom end, 100 hertz here, about 7.5 dBs. Then I also have to boost this high end because boosting all this low end kind of, made that mid-range a little bit foggy. So just cranking this up 4.3 dBs, around 2.8. And these EQs, especially in this mid-range, sounds really, really nice. Then I'm also taking this drive here and cranking it up. There's some lower harmonics that this plugin adds with this drive, and it sounds really, really good. So I'm using that. So let's turn it on. See the difference? Again, before. And after. So a pretty big difference there. Then going into the lo-fi. Again, making it crunchy, not taking off a ton of top end this time because it was already, by adding the Sony EQ here, I'm boosting up those lows. I am, in a sense, I'm not actually taking away highs, but by boosting a lot of lows, that's technically what you're doing. So all I'm really doing is just using the distortion and the saturation just to kind of dirty it up a little bit and make it a little bit fatter and thicker. So let's hear it. Again, before. And on. Alright, and there I'm going into the 8th note delay again for this one. So let's check that out. Okay, so let me play the first kick with this one now because these two kicks complement each other. So let's see how those 8th note delays work well with each other. So yeah, just a different sense of rhythm and musicality there. And again, they are pronounced a lot now, but once they're in the mix, you don't really hear them that much. Hopefully it's just adding a little bit more rhythm that's not quite as noticeable. Then with the snare, this one had a little click on the top end that I wanted to get rid of. But let's listen to it in its raw form. And let me just loop this. Turn it on. So it had a nice, cool bottom end to it, that sort of 808 style bottom end for like that snare or whatever, that heavy snare. But that top end was just too much. So I added that lo-fi here. Again, taking out a ton at the top end. This time it's set to 7350. And distortion, and no saturation this time, but just thickening it up. I'm trying to accentuate that bottom end just a little bit. It sounded nice, but I wanted it to be even more thicker and fuller. So let's see what it sounds like now, before and after. So it's really lo-fi now, almost like it sounds like it's coming from, you know, underwater or something like that. Then I got this drum Verb here, and this one particular send here is going to both drum Verb 1 and drum Verb 2. So these ones come in, this Verb comes in because I have, well, I'll show you right here, I have some automation. You can see I have it turned off, and then the reverb comes in on the second half of the verse. And so once this is turned on, this is basically the send level going to these two reverbs, then it activates drum Verb 1 and drum Verb 2. And the reason why I wanted in on this section, because basically every section of this record sort of changes a little bit and it morphs and it does something different. So I'm trying to follow that, and the rhythm changes a little bit in the second half here, so I'm trying to add a little bit more ambience to the snare to sort of follow suit with that rhythm. But you'll see sort of later once I play everything. But so I'll play the first snare here, first drum Verb 1. Let me go back to the waveform. Let's play that. Alright, so let's listen to drum Verb 2 now, see what that's doing. Let me turn off the Camel Crusher and the reverb so you can hear the difference for what this drum Verb is doing. Alright, so let's play both of these drum Verbs together now. It's really, really wet, eh? But again, once the, you know, everything else comes in, it's actually not that bad. It actually fits into the rest of the record. So now we got an eighth note here, so let's play that. Okay, so let's play the eighth note again with both of these reverbs. All right. So now we are on to percussion low. So this is actually more of a kick, but it came to me as percussive low, and I kind of just got used to the sound and the label being like that, so I just left it. But this one was a pretty deep sounding kick. So the first thing I have here is the EQ3. I'm just cutting off a little bit. I have it set to 124, just cutting off those extreme lows, because again, like I said, it was just a little bit too deep for me, or at least for my taste on the record. So let's check it out. Alright, so then I have the lo-fi plugin again. You know, you can kind of see the trend. I'm using this pretty much on everything. But yeah, so the goal with this one is, again, there's a little bit of top end that I wanted to get rid of, and I'm using the sample rate reducer to do that. But then I'm also, because the sound is a little bit tubby, using the distortion and the saturation to sort of bring out that mid-range, but it's also, it's adding the, cranking up this distortion here is adding some lower harmonics to it, so it's kind of thickening it up again. So anything that I cut out with the EQ, it's kind of bringing it back, but not in a tubby way, more of like a tight sounding way. So you hear when I play it. course it is adding volume to it. But then the last thing we have here is the open hat, and this is in the first half of the verse here. EQ3, there's a little bit of a frequency around the 3K range, especially when everything else comes in, and the vocals, it was just a little bit piercing on the ear, so I want to cut that out. You might not even be able to notice it, but let's check it out. Alright, then I have this limiter here, and at first I think when I slammed this thing on, I was trying to do sort of similar to what the EQ is doing, and the EQ is taking away some of that harshness, but I was going to use this limiter was to sort of reduce that transient a little bit so that it could tame some of those, you know, harsh frequencies that come out of this hat, but it really wasn't working. And then I think I just pulled it back up, and then I just kind of left it. So that's kind of why it's here. It's actually not really doing anything. Maybe adding a tiny bit of, you know, high-end reduction, but I'm talking like 0.5%, you know. But anyways, I'll let you listen. But it is actually reducing the volume too. You can see this is -12. But let's check it out. Yeah, so nothing too special about that. But then I have this going to the Reverb, and I like the space again that this Reverb has, and something about the space on this hat sounded really nice. So I'll play that for you now. It added a nice subtle length to the hat, and it kind of helped to push it back slightly in the record as well. So it didn't just stick out like, you know, everything else is sort of into the mix, I guess you could say, and then this would just be sitting right on top of it. So that kind of helped to push it back just a little bit. But yeah, so that's pretty much everything that I did there. Anyways, you can ignore this automation. That's for another tutorial. It has nothing to do with these verses here. But yeah, so that's it. So I guess what we can do is we can see how everything sounds together now. Just as a reminder of what everything is doing, all these effects and all this processing is doing. Let's turn off the effects, or sorry, the instruments. You can hear the drums by themselves. So yeah, so normally I actually wouldn't do this much affecting to the drums, but for whatever reason on this record it just felt right. It felt really good, and thankfully Amir was on the same page as me, because when I sent it to him he was actually really happy with it. But another thing I mentioned too is that I didn't actually notice this until after I was done the record and I was going back and sort of putting together this tutorial, that I actually didn't use a lot of third-party plugins. A lot of it was stock. Even the third-party stuff that I used was just cheap or just like fairly common stuff. So just trying to show you an example that, especially when you're starting out, or at least you're in that phase of sort of transitioning to, you know, trusting your judgment, trusting your gut and all that stuff, you know, we kind of get stuck in this bubble of trying to use the most expensive plugin or this plugin. If I want to get this sound, I have to use this plugin because, you know, so I heard so-and-so uses it. You know, it's all just about your creativity and your imagination, and then just grab the plugin, the first plugin that you think is going to do that job. If it doesn't work, take it out, use another one, you know. So, and that's kind of how I mix, is I just kind of mostly go through intuition. Obviously you have to think logically about what you're doing, but a lot of it's intuitive, a lot of the moves, you know, and you just kind of decide on something and then you move on to the next part of the record. So a lot of my decisions were, you know, based off of all these free plugins or cheap plugins. So just wanted to show you that and explain that to you, because you don't have to use, you know, the plugin of the month or whatever it is, because there's so many plugins coming out. You can get lost in this whole sea of plugins and everything. So, but yeah, anyways, I guess that's it for now, and I will see you on the next tutorial. Take care. Throughout. So then what I did on the bass high after that was I added this Camel Crusher just to pull out some of those, you know, mids and highs, add some harmonics to it, so that way it stands out that much more. And then if you're listening to it on a pair of speakers that maybe won't replicate the lower frequencies that well, then this will sort of help stay.